This last Sunday was the finale or the closing ceremonies of the Summer Olympics, which is crazy. That seemed to go by really fast. I hope you had a chance to watch some, or if not all, of the Olympics this year. This year, we stumbled on women's gymnastics. I don't know what your favorite event is, but that was so much fun to watch with our kids, just to see how high these ladies get in the air and just how dangerous it is, all the flips and the dips and twirls that they do. It was pretty phenomenal to watch. In this Summer Olympics, the United States finished with the most gold medals of any country. And in fact, the most total medals. This is for the 7th straight Summer Olympics. And I wouldn't consider myself to be an emotional person. Risa would vouch for that. But for some reason, watching a fellow American win a medal, knowing all the hard work and the perseverance that is tied up in competing, all the pressure that's put on, sometimes just seconds in an event, it just gives me all of the feels. And at times, I find my allergies flaring up. But there's a connection. There's a shared identity I have towards these athletes that are competing all the way across the world. And what I find so unique and amazing about the U.S. is what unites us as a country is so different than most any other place in the world. We are identified not by our ethnicity or a shared history, but a set of ideals, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you notice this most distinctly when you visit other countries. We all come from such different places, different cultures, different contexts, especially in South Seattle. We are so diverse, which personally I love to see. I love exploring different cultures, different grocery stores. I love it all. And we aren't connected because you look like me or because we have a shared history together. We are united in the United States because we choose to take on ideals and values that make up a democratic society, something external that unites us, something unique to us. And maybe you're asking, Mark, why are you going through this civics lesson? Well, let me tell you. As followers of Jesus, what is our identity? Who are we really? I mean, we are all so different in many ways. And so how is it that we are brought together as the people of God? And over the next 3 weeks, we're going to spend time looking at some of the identities that we possess as the people of God, as Oasis Home Church. Who are we really? And we're continuing in our series called Saturate, where we've been looking at what it means to be the church in the everyday stuff of life. And if we look at the New Testament, which is the second half or so of the Bible, whenever we see people in the churches, specifically the ones that the Apostle Paul helped to plant, the ones he influenced, whenever they kind of went sideways, got out of place, he didn't just confront their wrongdoing and then tell them what to do. It seems he always started by reminding them of who God is and what he has done for them in Jesus, and then therefore who they are in light of that. And I find myself doing this same thing with my kids all the time. And maybe this is something you used as a parent, or maybe you've heard as a kid. I think of the phrase, were you raised in a barn? I guess it's more of a question. Essentially, it's this, is that who you really are? Is that who we are in this family? Are we just a bunch of animals that leave messes anywhere and everywhere we go? And so again, it's this question of identity. The Apostle Paul believed that how we live stems from our identity. In other words, we do what we do because of who we believe we are. And again, with kids, are you raised in a barn? You believe you're an animal, then you're going to act like an animal. That's why we say those things. Because of who God is and what God has done in the gospel, how should we see ourselves? And so today we're going to look at the first of these identities that we're going to look at over the next few weeks. And it's this, the people of God as a family. And if I could sum up the message today in a big idea, it would be this. In Jesus, we are identified as family. Again, in Jesus, we are identified as family. And just think about this. How would you describe what family is? I want you to take 60 seconds right now in your home church. I'm going to put up this question, but how would you define what family is? Take 60 seconds right now in your home church and discuss. I'm sure you discussed a lot of different ways of what a family is, how you would describe family. And there's a couple different types of family. First, there's biological family, right? It's the family that you're born into. And even that can look lots of different ways, right? There's your more typical nuclear family. Mom and dad, 2.5 kids, and a dog, right? That's that nuclear family. Or maybe it could be a single parent family. It could be an extended family with multiple generations in the same home. It could be a childless family, a step-parent family, a grandparent family. These are all different ways of describing a biological family. So that's the first type of family. We can talk about family is, it's the family you're born into. But there's a second type of family we talk about, and it's relational family. It's family you choose, right? Family that you choose to step into relationship with. And I can think of lots of different TV shows, kind of iconic shows over the years that have centered around this type of a family situation. But this can look as well a lot of different ways too. In fact, my son Judah and I went to Seahawks training camp the other day, and the host that was there to sort of rally the fans, or as they call them, the 12s, the 12th man, to get them excited and hyped for the team as they came out. They described the 12s, or the Seahawks fan base, as family. It says, we are all family here. So what does it mean that we are family? As a people of God, what does it mean that we are family? How does that identity shape how we live? Well, let's dig into this. So firstly, in Jesus, we are adopted into God's family. In Jesus, we are adopted into God's family. And this is a really unique kind of family when you think about an adoptive family. Because first, it's relational, right? It's family that is chosen. You choose to adopt someone, you choose to bring someone into the family. But it's also more than that, right? It's biological in a way, because again, they're taking on your name. They're becoming part of the family. They're taking on that identity as family. And when someone adopts a child, what are they really doing? As an act of will, they're choosing to bring that child into their family forever. In a sense, they're willing to bear the great cost, right? Take the risks that come with raising a child, giving that child their family name, investing a large portion of their life and time into that child. And then they make that child an heir to all that they own. It's not a small thing. It's not a trivial decision. In fact, there's a whole process involved in choosing to adopt. But that's exactly what God has done for us. He has adopted us into his family. He's paid the cost for our redemption at the cross. He's taken this risk of being grieved with our decisions. He gave us his name. He makes continual investments in our growth. And as we see throughout Scripture, he designates us as heirs of his kingdom. And he does this all with great love. This isn't a legal or technical reality. It's an expression of his divine love for us. And an adoptive family reveals the type of family we are brought into. It's more than biology. In fact, you can look around the room at your home church and you can plainly see we're different, right? We don't look, think, or act the same. Our identity as family isn't based on shared genes, but on a common story and a shared spirit. Listen to how this is described in the letter to the church in Galatia, which was, in fact, a church that was really struggling with their identity as the people of God instead of historical Israel. In Galatians chapter 4, verses 3 through 7, this is what we read. And that's the way it was with us before Christ came. We were like children. We were slaves to the basic spiritual principles of this world. But when the right time came, God sent his Son, born of a woman, subject to the law. God sent him to buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law, so that he could adopt us as his very own children. And because we are his children, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts. And it's that Spirit that's prompting us to call out, Abba, Father. Now you are no longer a slave, but God's own child. And since you are his child, God has made you his heir. This is each of our stories. Right? We were once orphans, not in a physical or biological sense, but spiritually. We were subject to the patterns and the desires of this world. We were, in a sense, lost and sort of wandering in that way. And then but, like this verse 4 begins with this word but. It's probably the greatest word in this passage. But at just the right time, God sent his son, right? Jesus came and purchased our freedom so that he could adopt us as his very own. The gospel forms a new family. And God showed his love for us by giving his son to die on our behalf, to make us his dearly loved children. Which means you and I, we have a new identity. We have a new name. We are a child of the Father. We are son or daughter of God. This is each of our stories. If we're following Jesus, this is your story. This is my story. And again, the details of that story may differ, but the plot and the hero are the same. In Jesus, we are adopted into God's family. That is our identity. But as the Apostle Paul has already said, how does this identity shape our living? Well, as those adopted into God's family, second is this: we love others like family. We love because God has loved us. If he's done this for me, if he's done this for you, he can do the same for others. And early on in our marriage, Risa and I had a student join our youth ministry in SeaTac that was raised in a strict Muslim home. He was born in Somalia, which is, if you look at the statistics, about 99% Sunni Muslims, which are very traditional, very devout, very orthodox form of Islam. And he had started coming to our youth group through friends, and Jesus was working on his heart. And I can remember a specific conversation I had with him down at Angle Lake Park. And I remember him sharing with me kind of the reality of what following Jesus would mean for him. If he were to declare his faith and publicly say, I'm following Jesus, it would likely mean he'd be kicked out of his home. And I can remember in that conversation just assuring him we would do whatever it takes. If that was what he felt called to do, if he wanted to put his faith in Jesus, that Jesus would provide for him. And little did I know that provision, when he chose to follow Jesus, and sure enough, when he did, he was told to move out, would come through my family, would come through our home. And Risa and I, we went from being newly married, trying to figure out life together, to now raising a 17-year-old tall Somali son in our family. And what was most amazing about that season of life was how quickly he became part of our family. I mean, almost from the start, Risa and I became mom and dad for him. And our extended family just kind of enveloped him like he had always been there. He had a birthday party for the first time really in a long time. There were presents under the tree with his name on it at every Christmas we went to. He had chores. We even threw a kitten into the mix. He was family, not because he looked like us or shared our history, but it was because of Jesus. Jesus called us and brought us together. And God has perfectly loved you so that through you he might love others. He pours his perfect love into your heart through his Spirit in order that you might love others with the love that he has given me and you. When you believe the gospel regarding God's love for you, you can't help but love others because he loved you first, right? If you believe God dearly loves you, you will love others in the same way. Again, that love, we just can't contain that. If he's done it for us, we believe he can do it for others. You will love others like family. And that's the story that we see with the early church. In fact, listen to how the first church, the beginnings of the church, is described in Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 46. All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions, and they shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day. They met in homes for the Lord's Supper and shared their meals with great joy and generosity. This is such a beautiful picture of the church. Again, we see all the believers. There was this unity. All shows up a couple times here, right? There was this unity there in Jesus. It says they collectively devoted themselves to God's word, to fellowship or sharing their lives together, including sharing in meals, which is my favorite part. It comes up a lot, and to prayer. And let me tell you, this sounds a lot like a home church, right? This sounds a lot like what we are doing. And this is how the church began. And where did it all happen? It happened in homes. This adoptive, unique, at times messy family, they says that they shared all that they had. They were generous and were filled with joy as they sacrificed for each other, as they prayed for each other, as they did their best just to do life together. And God did a powerful work among them as they lived this out, right? There were lives that were changed. Miracles happened. And they were left at wonder at how God was at work. That sounds like something we could experience, something we would want to experience, right? And at the end of chapter 2 of Acts, I didn't share it out in verse 47, it talks about how God added more to the family daily. In this way of doing church, the church grew like wildfire. And this leads to the last point. As those adopted into God's family, what does that mean for us? How do we live out the identity? First, we love others like family. And then the last thing, the third thing is this: for his purposes in the world. There is something countercultural in this kind of living, in choosing to love others this way. And Jesus promised that this way of being, this type of love would speak to the world around us. In fact, listen to how Jesus said this in John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. When we choose to love others like family, it speaks loudly to our world. And it has to be more than words, right? It's easy to say, hey, man, I love you, to say those words, but it's much more difficult showing love for someone. And we're not just to show love in any way. Jesus says we should love others as he has loved us. He makes that really clear here, right? Think of how Jesus has loved us. Think of how he's loved you and how he's loved me. It's been described throughout this message. We've talked about how he has paid the price for our adoption into the family of God. How he's laid down his life for us. He's given us a new name, and now we share in the life and kingdom that is his. Wow, that is the way that God has loved us, and he's calling us to love others the same way. Think about where you live. Do you know your neighbors? Has God given you a heart to love them like family? What would it look like if you did? What about the people in your home church? Do you long to love one another this way? How might things be different if you did? Now think about who God has sent you to. Again, maybe it's your neighbors, maybe it's coworkers or peers at school, or maybe others in your family, your friend circle. What would it look like if you were to love them as if they were your brothers and sisters? Like children of our Father in heaven. But I know you might be saying, wait, but they're not yet. They don't yet belong to God. Yes. But we don't know who God is drawing to himself. And how will they ever come to know the love of God if they don't experience it through us, right? They will know we are his followers by our love. Consider those God has put around you as the lost children of God who don't yet know how much their Father loves them. See them as spiritual orphans in need of adoption, in need of knowing their true heavenly Father. And then show them his fatherly love in tangible ways. And I know it can be hard, right, to love some of these people. You say, man, they're just kind of hard to love. They don't make it easy. Well, we didn't necessarily make it easy for God either to love us, right? We were at one time before we came to Jesus, we were enemies of God. And yet he chose to love us like his own dearly loved through Jesus. And in choosing to love this way at times, we may question it. If I do this, won't I be a doormat? Won't people just see me as an easy target, someone to walk over? Maybe you say, I serve and they just never seem grateful. Some just keep taking advantage of me. And I get that. That is something we all have to struggle with. And Jesus talks a lot about that in the Sermon on the Mount. But the truth is, we have yet to fully express the gratitude God deserves for us, for giving his son for you and for me, and continuing to be gracious to us. I mean, if we want to see what it means to be treated as a doormat, probably the prime example was Jesus hanging on the cross, dying for the sins of humanity, while they spat on him and they mocked him. We love because he first loved us. And it says, with the joy set before him, he endured the cross because he loves us, and we are called to love others with that same kind of love. Let's not forget who we are, Oasis. In Jesus, we are family. As those adopted into God's family, we love others like family for his purposes in the world. And as I wrap up this message, I have just a few next steps for us. And the first, as always, is become a follower of Jesus. Have you received the work that Jesus has done for you? Have you been brought into the family of God? If not, today can be your adoption day. It starts as we say yes to Jesus. We say, Jesus, I give you my life. Would you make me new? Forgive me of the ways I have lived apart from you and save me. I believe you are able. If that's you saying that prayer today, would you let someone in your home church know? We would love to pray specifically for you and help you on this journey of discipleship, of following Jesus, because, right, we're family. And a second next step is this, is we are family. When you look around the room at your home church, what do you see? How do we see ourselves? How we see ourselves of the church will impact how we live, right? We live out of who we are. Do you see an adoptive, beautiful, diverse family that is centered on Jesus? Because listen, that's who we are. I would encourage you to invite Jesus to change how you see your home church, to see from this point of view, to see from his point of view. And maybe your experience of family has not been the best. Maybe as you hear us talk about the church as a family, you say, you know what, I don't know if I want more family. I've had enough family in my life. Maybe that's been a wound for you. And I would encourage you to be vulnerable in your home church today. Don't feel like you need to share, every detail. But would you just take a step of being open and say, this is where I'm at. This is something I struggle with, and allow your fellow family members to pray for you, to help you to see family in a new light. Because again, we are called to love like family, right? We want to love each other and lift each other up. In fact, that's the third and final next step today, is this love like family. We are called to love like Jesus has loved us. Can you imagine how our home churches will grow as we choose to love in this way? There are so many in our region and even the greater Berea and South King County area that are isolated and alone and in need of family. Spiritual orphans that are longing to be adopted and again brought into a family. I would encourage you, let's ask Jesus for eyes to see those around us and to choose to love in a way that reflects him. I'm grateful for each of you and our Oasis family. God bless Oasis.